Hello, welcome to Faith Family First. I'm Jim Hochberg. Eva asked me to help lead the discussion today, and I'm happy to do that. So, we're going to talk about the U.S. Supreme Court. Well, Eva, so there was an announcement that Supreme Court Justice, Associate Justice Stephen Breyer, who was actually nominated by Bill Clinton in the 90s.
I have to jump in and say that. So a couple weeks ago is when all this conversation started, right? Where it hit the news that he was going to retire. And then within that same 24-hour period of that first release, suddenly you're hearing all this stuff like, wait, he was going to make that announcement, but they jumped the gun. They made it first.
Well, what they were saying is his office isn't where the news came from. It came from a leak, which there aren't a lot of leaks at the United States Supreme Court compared to just about any other organization. Yeah, I kind of chuckled about the news on that.
Well, and you can just check. I mean, if you're bored and you have nothing else to do, you can go check and see all the Twitter, reports that went out. People were just
people had their own opinions.
well,
of
because
nothing.
everybody felt like, I think it's because, just last year in 2021, Justice Breyer said that he kind of liked being, in his place on the Supreme Court. He liked being one of the elderly guys that had been there with the knowledge and the wisdom and all that. So it did. I think it did come as a surprise to some.
And compared to President Biden, he's got way better mental faculties even today.
Yeah, so so basically as we set this up, that's what I was shocked. I mean, there are some people that were some people expected it, but the way that it happened left some questions.
But remember, federal judgeships, including the U.S. Supreme Court, are all what is called lifetime appointments. Their tenure is until they don't want to have the job anymore. Like a lot of other government positions have mandatory retirement days. In the state of Hawaii, the Supreme Court is 70, I believe. So it doesn't matter what your mental health is like or your physical health. When you turn 70, you retire. That's just the way it goes.
I'm not dead yet.
But the United States Supreme Court and all the federal judges are lifetime appointments. That's the way it goes. So he could be 99 years old and want to still be on the court, and he would still be on the court.
Yeah, and I think some of the conversations I've seen have been fascinating. You've got people that acknowledge that having somebody with wisdom on the Supreme Court is necessary. Someone who's kind of been there. They have a track record. He's known to be a liberal, right? I mean, this is no surprise.
Oh,
for
he's
anybody.
very liberal.
And Trump, under his presidency, appointed 3 Supreme Court justices. So Justice Breyer being replaced is not going to change.
By Biden isn't going to change
it's not
the
going to
balance.
change. But I do, let's continue this conversation because I think you all are hearing these conversations ad nauseum right now.
Well, and the thing is, as we know in other contexts within Congress, there have been quite a few decisions that the Senate has made that were 50-50 ties because there are 50 Republicans and 50 Democrats. There's only 100 senators, 2 per state. And when they vote on something and it's a tie, the vice president under the United States Constitution casts the tie-breaking vote.
Do you know how many times that's actually happened? I don't.
In history?
Yeah.
With all the presidents ever?
Well,
No.
at least, or current. Do you have like a current recollection of one that...
It's been a lot. I mean, usually you don't even hear about congressional votes because usually it's not really newsworthy from a controversial perspective for the news people because they like to cover things people are going to watch, right? So I don't. But I do know that it's been a lot more than it should be because when there's a 50-50 tie, that means that across the country, people went to the polls and they elected senators, and it happened to break down across the country equally.
Well, I'm glad you're having this conversation because when the news of Justice Breyer's retirement broke, there was some speculation at that time that Biden was going to appoint Kamala to that position? And then what would that mean if it was a split, and would she have to vote for herself? And then of course it came back and said no, that he wasn't going to do that. But but it's an interesting conversation to have.
But there's actually a deeper conversation than that.
Okay,
Because,
let's have it.
well, and it's not the first time there's been a 50-50 split in the Senate. In the 2000s, there was a 50-50 split and a similar kind of agreement, because the way the Senate operates every election cycle is the majority party and the minority party agree on how they're going to have rules for that period of time until the next election, where the Senate majority minority can change by the vote of the people, right? Because remember, like I always say, we own the government. We're the voters. They are our representatives. We have to act like that. So when we did act like that in 2020 and we split the Senate 50-50, if it wasn't for the vice president's role in breaking the vote with the extra vote, nothing would happen, which would be kind of good, except the budget would have to be passed and stuff like that. So anyway, because there's a 50-50 tie, they had to agree between the Republicans and the Democrats how they were going to staff the committees, how the committee voting was going to happen, and how they're going to be funded. Because usually when one party is the majority, they get one more guy on the committees, so there's never a tie in the committee. So a committee will hear a bill, they'll vote yes or no. If it's a yes, it goes to the body, and they all vote on it. So that's the interesting thing is February 3rd, 2021, there was a resolution, what was it? Resolution 27 in the Senate that set up how they agreed with a 50-50 tie to run the committees. And what they agreed to is there would be an equal number of Republicans and Democrats on each committee. And if there was a tie, because the vice president doesn't vote in the committee, she votes in the Senate as a whole when there's a tie. So in the committee, if there's a tie, the measure fails because it didn't get a majority vote in the committee. However, and we have a similar rule in the legislature in Hawaii, any member can bring to the floor a measure that didn't get out of committee, and everybody gets to vote on it, right? So the agreement that the Senate made in 2021 was certain members of the committee, basically the ranking member of the minority party and the chairman of the majority party, can do that. They can bring that question to vote by the whole body because it didn't make it out of the committee. But here's the interesting thing. When it is a question for the whole body, it goes back to the cloture and can't think of that word that the Senate has that the House doesn't have, where they have to have 60 votes. Anyway, filibuster. So if somebody got nominated for Supreme Court and the Senate Judiciary Committee tied 50-50, none of the Republicans would vote for Kamala. All the Democrats wanted Kamala because it has to be a tie. It can't just lose by an uneven number of votes. Then the Democrat that's in charge of the Judiciary Committee can bring it to a vote of the entire Senate to, in effect, pass it out of committee. But in order to take that vote, the cloture of 60 votes in favor of having that vote has to occur, which means 10 Republicans would have to vote that the whole Senate should consider Kamala Harris or whoever for the Supreme Court in order to get to the vote of whether she should be, which could tie 50-50, but it won't if 10 Republicans vote to have the vote. Anyway, so all of that is to say, it's very interesting that before Justice Breyer announced his retirement, there was this full court press by the Democrats to get rid of the filibuster in the Senate. I was really surprised, but I was intrigued by the announcement that Breyer was going to retire, because I was thinking that's what they were trying to get rid of because of this 50-50 tie thing.
So what do you think is going to happen? So right now you've got names that are out there, right? Some have a higher rank than others on who could potentially be appointed to the court. The Senate's going to have to vote on these people. If you remember when Trump put out his list, he always put a list, right? So people always knew in advance kind of the people that he was thinking of with.
And he did that for people like me, because I wasn't really a Trump supporter until I saw his list for the Supreme Court.
I know many people who agree with
That
you on
got
that.
me.
Yeah,
That's what got me.
There were people
So
that said
there
they
was a
voted for him
political
with their
reason for that.
they held their nose, voted for him, but they appreciated what he was going to potentially do. For
And
the
as
court.
an attorney that litigates constitutional stuff in the federal court system, potentially at the Supreme Court, whoever those people are is important to me.
Yeah, and I think that people, for the most part, they don't know a lot of these names unless you're rolling in politics
Correct.
all the time. You're not going to know who these people are. And right now, what's happening is you're seeing all these faces, right? Whatever news you're watching, they're showing this person is high on the list. This this person, and the conversation seems to be on what the qualifications of this person should be, and should it be, just because they should be a female, and just because they should be a woman of color. Or should it be someone who has these criterias? And that's the battle that we're seeing playing out in the media.
But there's also a difference between the list that the president or that candidate Trump put out. That was his list from the horse's mouth. No question, those were his people. What we're seeing on television are trial balloons. A political organization or the administration or the Democratic Party, somebody suggesting these people might be the ones. It's not from the horse's mouth on a piece of paper from the president's office. So you don't know.
And when it does come directly from him, then people should take that opportunity to do some research on those people on their own and not just listen to what the media is saying about them.
But if, in fact, what I've seen President Biden say on television, it's going to be a woman of color.
Right.
There's two guys on the list that the news is showing. So I'm wondering, is that one of these transgender things?
No, but it goes back to the point that you made, is that's not his list. That's
It's not
just
his
names.
list.
So, he seems in all of his speaking that he's doing, he seems to be wanting to stick to that promise that it will be a female, a woman of color.
So if you were a political scientist, you worked as a professor at a university, whatever, Harvard, you would have been completely not surprised that this president, this Democratic Party, would choose to define a candidate for the Supreme Court based on the very same characteristics that their entire electoral scheme uses to win elections. They're always identifying non-important characteristics. What's your race? What's your sex?
Well, and this is the same
Instead
party.
of how qualified are you for the job?
Well, and this is the same party that's trying to tell us don't pay attention to gender because it doesn't mean what you think it means.
Well, it doesn't mean anything because it occurs between your ears.
Do you remember, for those of you that watch The Princess Bride, you remember that he keeps saying that word, inconceivable, and he says it all the time. And then there's points in there where he goes, I don't think that means what you think it means. That's kind of where I feel
Exactly.
like. So I'm curious as to if it's going to be a female and a woman of color, what does that define to mean? I mean, could we end up having our first transgender on the Supreme Court?
Under the current reality of the Democratic Party, absolutely. They've already got. There was a meme I saw. The first woman. I forget. They go down this whole long list of things. The first woman this, the first woman that, but they're all actually men.
Well, the biggest thing that I'm getting in my office, not just locally but nationally, is these people that are having they're having conniptions because there are men, biological men, that are breaking women's records, but it as a woman.
Well, and a woman will never physically be able to break that record again.
Well, I hope there's a woman out there right now that can whoop all
But you know what? One thing that
records.
I wanted to go back to out of that Senate Resolution 27 on February 3rd, 2021, because this, I think, is what people are going to cheer when they hear, because we would like our politics to reflect this, and it doesn't. But they wrote it, so I think they meant it, in that resolution where they split the committee positions 50-50, allowing for a tie and then having this whole filibuster thing to happen. Here's what they said in Section 4. It is the sense of the Senate that both leaders, the Republican leader and the Democrat leader, shall seek to attain an equal balance of the interests of the two parties when scheduling and debating legislative and executive business generally. That's how I would really like our Congress to operate. That they should respect the fact that everybody didn't vote for them, but they're representing the people that didn't vote for them as well as the people that did, and they need to attain an equal balance of interests for everybody.
Well, I know that Politico did an article in 2013. So this was around the time that that resolution was being debated. And in the Politico article, which I will link down below, President Obama at the time had to make a statement on what he felt was happening when this went through. And I think you'll appreciate his quote. So this was a quote of President Obama, according to Politico. He says, this isn't obstruction on substance, on qualifications. It's just to gum up the works. So I think that we're seeing a process of gumming up the works.
So we had the...
Somebody make a meme, gumming up the works.
We had the interesting occurrence of pushing to get rid of the filibuster unsuccessfully. Senator Sinema from Arizona, Senator Manchin from West Virginia, 2 Democrat senators out of their 50 said, no, I'm not voting to do that. So it failed. And of course, Republicans didn't jump in at 3 to overtake and support the bill. So that happened first. Then you get Breyer's announced retirement, however that went down. And then after that, knowing that we have this 2021 50-50 split with the ability to require a 60-vote supermajority in order to have the vote on the nominee for the Supreme Court, Mitch McConnell was in the news in January of 2022 warning, this is what the Washington Examiner said, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell warned President Joe Biden not to replace retiring Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer with a nominee pushed by the radical left. Why, if he's in the minority, is he telling the president in a warning fashion how to approach nominating somebody for the Supreme Court? Because he negotiated and signed Resolution 27. He knows they ain't getting somebody he's not willing to vote for because they'll tie in committee and they'll never get 60 votes out of committee.
And please remember that the makeup of our government could change in November if there's a red wave.
It would change in January of next year.
And may I quote McConnell, since you're there, and this again was back in 2013, he said, and I quote, according to the same Political article, the solution to this problem is an election. The solution to this problem is at the ballot box. We look forward to having a great election on 2014. So if we change it to 2022, could that make a difference?
Well, it would if you remember, Obama nominated Merrick Garland in the last year of his presidency, and McConnell didn't hold a vote because he said, we're going to wait until the election. And if Hillary wins, she'll do the nominating and we'll deal with it. Well, this is only the first year of Biden's, but Biden, I think maybe not President Biden, but somebody working for him, realized that if the Senate changes control in this November at the election, they better get Breyer replaced before.
Because if they stall or it doesn't happen before November, it's not going to look very good for President Biden.
Well, correct. And so
what do you think he'd do? So if that happened, and you know, I'm not making any predictions because I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, anything's possible right now. I mean, the quote that you said of Minority Leader McConnell, he's kind of almost in a sense, he's kind of, like when you're sitting in the classroom and you're raising your hand, like, call on me. It almost seems like he's posturing.
He's very much posturing, and I'm going to read the rest of his quote.
Okay, you
because
go.
he's way more than raising his hand.
Okay.
So after warning President Biden not to replace Associate Justice Breyer with a nominee pushed by the, quote, radical left, he goes on, he's quoted now in this Washington Examiner article, looking ahead, the American people elected a Senate that's evenly split 50-50. Resolution 27. To the degree that President Biden received a mandate, it was to govern from the middle, to steward our institutions and unite America, which is what President Biden ran on. So then McConnell went on to say, the president must not outsource this important decision to the radical left. The American people deserve a nominee with demonstrated reverence for the written text of our laws and our Constitution. Now, Breyer is not a justice that could ever be called an originalist or a constructionist. He was a Roe v. Wade guy, except he wasn't there in 73. But he has no problem supporting Roe v. Wade. Yeah. I mean, he is the living, breathing Constitution guy. So I think what McConnell's saying is we have Resolution 27. You're not going to get a radical. So don't listen to your friends, AOC, all those guys, Planned Parenthood, all those guys, NARAL, all those guys, Emily's List, all those guys. Don't listen to the radical left. Realize you're representing both sides, because remember what it said in Resolution 27. We expect you to treat both sides fairly. It's a 50-50 split. I don't know if McConnell's pushing on Resolution 27 was in particular about a Supreme Court justice, but it could be. But I think now in hindsight, I'm really glad that they did that, because what happens with the replacement of Breyer is kind of a minor detail, like you said. Breyer was liberal. Biden's going to put in a liberal. But it's going to be a young person who's going to be there for a very long time, like Breyer has been. And so it's important that we don't let the Supreme Court go as crazy left as the Democrat Party is going with some of the constituencies of AOC and those guys. Open borders, defund the police. You don't want that kind of person as a Supreme Court justice. You just don't. It's not healthy for the country. So I think it will be really fun to watch how the Supreme Court nominee Senate hearing thing goes, because now we know about this 50-50 split under Resolution 27 that's going to continue until at least the end of December 2022, depending on how the election in 2022 goes. The next Senate will have to do its own resolution if it doesn't remain a 50-50 tie.
And you'll have to see and watch those names, because they're going to come and go. With these kind of conversations happening, what's going to happen is either Biden's going to draw the line in the sand and stick with what he promised to his socialist buddies, or he's going to have to say, I need a win. And if he needs a win, then he's going to have to reach across the aisle and do something that he knows is going to be a win. So
well, and remember too, when Antonin Scalia died, there was a period of time where there was no ninth justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. And they had 8 to 8 ties on cases, which meant after 10 years of litigating and the case finally got there, they didn't get a resolution.
Well, it's interesting because with Breyer's retirement, it's going to happen at the end of this Supreme Court tenure. What do they call that? The session?
Breyer's going to leave in June.
In
June. The end of June.
So in June, he's going to retire. We're going to get the ruling down on the Roe versus Wade and what's going to happen on all of that. And he'll go off into his merry retirement. And we could potentially not have a Supreme Court justice in his stead.
You know what's really interesting that you bring that up? If the Dobbs case goes against the radical position that abortion is a sacrament and we have to protect it at all costs, at all times, with all means, which basically means if the Dobbs court says viability is not the only test, these other tests are fine, 15 weeks, no abortions after 15 weeks, Biden is going to get so much pressure to put in a super abortion radical Supreme Court Justice in Breyer's place, which hopefully we can write letters to Mitch McConnell, send him love notes that says Senate Resolution 27, 2021, Senate Resolution 27, 2021. We're counting on you. And if we just hit him with emails regularly, once a month, once a week, whatever, he'll remember we know that he's got the upper hand on this thing and he better exercise it because he's a little squishy sometimes.
And I'll tell you what, for me personally, I would love to have a woman and a woman of color on the Supreme Court. I would, but what I
Candace Owens.
What I was going to say, there are some great women out there, but what I'd like to see more than that is if we could finally get off of this subject of looking at whether someone's qualified just because of the color of their skin. I really want to get beyond that because there are great women of color that would make a great addition to the Supreme Court. But the names that are coming out are tilted to one side because that's what they do.
And what's also interesting, people don't realize, you don't have to be a judge to be on the U.S. Supreme Court. You do have to be a lawyer to be a federal judge.
I like Condoleezza Rice.
Hang on. She wants to be the NFL commissioner.
Oh, good.
But no, listen to this in the last closing minute. You don't have to be a lawyer or a judge to be nominated for the United States Supreme Court. The U.S. Constitution does not require that. So any woman of color could be nominated without having to even be a lawyer.
Well, so as we close this program, let's remind all of these great women and men that are out there watching this show that, especially if you're a young adult or you're a millennial, maybe you need to start looking into maybe going to law school. Because even if you don't need to be an attorney to be on the Supreme Court, we need way more justices across this great nation that are willing to stand for gospel values. And if that's you and you like to argue and you like to research, then maybe being a judge or being an attorney. And if you want to know what it's like to be an attorney, you can send an email to jim@jameshochberglaw.com and he'll be more than happy to tell you what it's like to be a person of faith and practicing law right here in the beautiful state of Hawaii.
If you want to be a law school person, contact Alliance Defending Freedom, adf.org. They have a great college undergraduate program for people of faith that are interested in that.
Yep. And if you're watching and you've got an idea for the show, don't forget to comment. Let us know if there's something that you think we need to talk about. Stay plugged into HawaiiFamilyForum.org, HawaiiFamilyAdvocates.com. Make sure you're raising your voice, you're staying in prayer, and that you're doing all the things the Lord is requiring of you. Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you? But to love justice and to do mercy and to walk humbly with your God. Stay tuned to us right here on the Triple F Podcast for Faith and Family First. We'll see you next week. Mahalo, everybody.
Aloha.